We will talk about the true story of alien encounters. First story, close encounter of the first kind. Date of incident, September 3, 1965. Place of incident, Exeter, New Hampshire, USA. The moment in 1965 when lorry driver Terry Pell crashed off a rural road near Warminster, England, to avoid a fiery UFO that flew low over the road in front of him. The Exeter incident, as it became known, gained fame largely because the two policemen involved refused to be fobbed off with anodyne official explanations issued by Project Blue Book. The incident began at 1 a.m. when patrolman Eugene Bertrand was driving along Route 108. He saw a car parked by the side of the road in a remote rural spot and pulled over to investigate. Inside the car, Bertrand found a woman driver in a state of some distress. She said that her car had been followed by a bright white light in the sky that had dived down to hover over the vehicle. She had then stopped and the light flew off as Bertrand approached. After a quarter of an hour the light had not returned. So the woman drove off while Bertrand continued his patrol. Bertrand reported back to Exeter Police Station at about 2:30 a.m. There he found Norman Muscarello, who was shaking with fear and almost unable to talk. After a few minutes, Bertrand and Desk Sergeant Reginald Tolan got Muscarello calmed down and managed to get his story from him. Muscarello said he had been hitchhiking on Route 150, but unable to get a lift was walking to Exeter. He had reached Carl Dining Field Farm when a group of 5 red lights came swooping down from the sky to hover over a house about 30 meters, which is around 100 feet from where Muscarello was standing. The red lights began to pulsate in a pattern that repeated itself. As the startled Muscarello stood watching, the lights suddenly darted towards him. Muscarello dived into a ditch, and when he peered back over the edge of his hiding place, the lights were diving down behind a line of trees as if landing in the field beyond. Bertrand drove Muscarello back to the site of his encounter. The pair got out of the parked patrol car and looked about. There was nothing to be seen, so Bertrand radioed back that all seemed quiet. Tolan suggested that the field where the lights were seen to land should be investigated. Bertrand switched on his flashlight and began advancing. He was about 15 meters, which is about 50 feet from the car, when cattle at the nearby farm began to call loudly as if an alarm, then mill about in excitement. Suddenly the red lights rose up from the ground behind the trees. Bertrand drew his pistol and Muscarello began shouting, "Shoot it, shoot it." But as the lights came closer, Bertrand thought better of opening fire and instead raced back to the patrol car. The two men hid behind the car as the lights approached to within about 30 meters, so bright were the lights that Bertrand began to fear that he might get burnt. He scrabbled inside his car to find the radio and called for backup. Patrolman David Hunt took the radio call at 2:55 a.m. By the time he arrived at Bertrand's parked car, the red lights had retreated. Hunt saw them clearly enough about half a mile away. A minute or two later the lights rose higher into the sky and headed off in a southeasterly direction, accelerating rapidly as they went. All 3 men were considerably shaken by the experience. When word got out they came in for a fair degree of teasing from colleagues and friends. But both Hunt and Bertrand felt that they should make a formal report. They accordingly wrote out and signed statements that they sent to Project Blue Book. The local press took up the story, prompting the Pentagon to issue a dismissive statement that the men must have mistaken a flight of B-47 military aircraft that were flying over the area. Bertrand and Hunt were indignant at the suggestion. Both men had spent long hours driving the lonely highways at night when aircraft of all types were flying about overhead. They felt that they knew what a B-47 looked and sounded like, as well as other aircraft, and were adamant that what they had seen that night was entirely different. Moreover, Bertrand had spent some years in the USAF before joining the police and was even more accustomed to seeing aircraft under all sorts of conditions. In any case, the B-47 flight had passed over at around 1:30 a.m. and the sighting had continued until past 3 a.m. The two men wrote to Blue Book restating the facts and demanding that the USAF formally absolve them of making the story up or of being incompetent witnesses, a charge that might well damage their careers. After some weeks, and the sending of a formal second letter, the two policemen got the reply they wanted. The sighting had been reclassified by Blue Book as unidentified and the competence of the officers accepted. The EXETER incident is interesting not just for the details of the UFO itself but also for the reactions of those involved. The cattle at the farm were clearly aware of something unusual. While both the unknown woman motorist and Muscarello were terrified, the two policemen reacted on the night with commendable courage. Especially Bertrand, but did not really know how to respond to a situation outside their experience. The USAF and Pentagon ridiculed the idea of a UFO even before they had had a chance to study the information, which prompted the townsfolk of EXETER to ridicule their policemen. Bertrand and Hunt then stuck to their story absolutely until they received a partial vindication. Thereafter both EXETER and the patrolman dropped out of the UFO story. It is indeed as if something utterly bizarre and inexplicable fell out of the sky over EXETER that night, then vanished. Before going on, if you like these stories, do hit the like button, subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell, so you will not miss new stories like this. Next, type of incident, radar visual nocturnal light. Date of incident, October 21, 1978. Place of incident, Bass Strait, Australia. The fatal encounter over Bass Strait made worldwide news reports within hours of its happening. The events were dramatic and appalling in equal measure. The sighting has gone down as a classic close encounter of the second kind. On the evening of October 21, 1978, 20-year-old Frederick Valentich prepared to fly from Melbourne to King Island and back. His task was to collect a catch of crayfish for dinner in the officers' mess of the Victoria Air Training Corps, where he was an instructor. He had made the flight many times before, but this was the first time he had done so at night. Although young, Valentich held an unrestricted pilot's license and was keen to increase his logged solo night flying time. The crayfish mission was an ideal opportunity to do so. Valentich took off in a Cessna 182 at 6:19 p.m. and at 7 p.m. passed over Cape Otway Lighthouse. He was now flying over Bass Strait, the stretch of sea between Tasmania and mainland Australia. At 7:06 p.m. Valentich radioed Melbourne Flight Control to ask if there were any other aircraft in his area. Melbourne replied that no known aircraft were around. So far as they were concerned, Valentich was alone in the night sky. There was a slight pause. Then Valentich reported that a large aircraft showing 4 bright lights had just flown by about 300 meters, which is 1,000 feet above him. This made the incident a near miss in air traffic control terms. The staff at Melbourne asked Valentich to confirm that he was reporting the close presence of a large aircraft. Valentich did so and repeated that the object had passed him at speed. Valentich then asked Melbourne to check with the Royal Australian Air Force to see if they had any aircraft in the area that had not been advised to civilian air traffic control. Such things did happen, and it was clear by now that Valentich was becoming concerned. Melbourne promised to do so. At 7:09 p.m. Valentich was back on the radio. "It seems to be playing some sort of game with me," he reported. Melbourne asked him if he was still unable to identify the aircraft. "It's not an aircraft," came the surprising response, then the harsh crackle of static cut in, making the rest of Valentich's words inaudible. When his voice came back he was saying, "It is flying past. It has a long shape. Cannot identify more than that." There was a pause. Then Valentich blurted out, "It's coming for me right now." Followed by another pause. Then Valentich seemed to calm down. "I'm orbiting and the thing is orbiting on top of me. It has a green light and a sort of metallic light on the outside, At this point Melbourne received a response from the RAF confirming that no military aircraft were over Base Strait. Valentich replied by saying that the strange object had vanished. All seemed well until at 7:12 p.m. Valentich suddenly came back on the radio. "Engine is rough and coughing," he reported. Then a few seconds later he said, "Unknown aircraft is now on top of me." There was then another burst of static. Then silence. Melbourne repeatedly tried to contact Valentich but there was no answer. King Island airfield staff were alerted to watch for the approaching Cessna. Neither sight nor sound of the aircraft was detected. At 7:28 p.m. Melbourne ordered that a search should begin. Valentich had with him in the Cessna a standard life jacket and radio beacon, which was activated automatically if it fell into water. No radio signals were picked up from it. At dawn on the following day the RAF began an exhaustive search of the Base Strait by air. A small oil slick was seen near King Island, but that could have come from any one of a dozen sources. No sign of Valentich or his Cessna was ever found. In the following weeks many attempts were made to explain what had happened. One suggestion was that Valentich had somehow turned the aircraft upside down and was in fact seeing the reflection of his own lights in the sea, not a UFO above him. However, he had the strange aircraft in sight for about 7 minutes. And the Cessna 182 can fly upside down for only 30 seconds before the fuel system collapses. It seems likely that Valentich saw something extraordinary over the Base Strait that night. Whether the UFO directly caused his death, or disappearance, there is no way of knowing. Perhaps Valentich made some catastrophic error while concentrating on the UFO instead of his instruments. Or perhaps the UFO did have a hostile intent. Hope you like these true alien stories. Please leave a like for the video, subscribe to my channel and comment down below, so you will not miss any new videos like this. Thank you.